Welcome to the ONTIC Protective Intelligence Podcast. I'm Dr. Marisa Randazzo with ONTIC's Center for Connected Intelligence. After nearly 3 decades of experience working in security and protection, first at the U.S. Secret Service and then in the private sector, I'm delighted to have a chance to sit down with fellow security professionals here to discuss a wide array of current issues in the fields of security and protection. This podcast explores the turbulent world of risk, security, and protective strategies through conversations with leaders in the field. Now, on to the discussion. The world of security is constantly evolving. From cyber threats to physical intrusions, security professionals face a complex landscape. Today, a powerful new tool and risk is emerging: artificial intelligence. Two broad thinkers about AI and its place as a proponent or opponent of the physical security space are joining me today to explore the intersection of AI and physical security. First, Brian Tuskan, a noted figure in the security field, brings a wealth of experience from his law enforcement and corporate security background. Currently, he holds the position of Vice President and Chief Security Officer at ServiceNow's Global Safety and Security Team, a testament to his expertise and leadership. Also joining me is Phil Capizzi, the Manager of Enterprise Technology for Security Community Network. He has extensive experience in software implementation and brings a unique technical perspective to our discussion. Over his career, Phil has consistently built and led teams that deliver results for public and private sector clients. Together, Brian and Phil will shed light on the evolving threatscape and how AI is changing the game, specific ways AI can be harnessed to bolster physical security, practical considerations for security teams looking to leverage AI effectively, and collaborating across disciplines to ensure responsible and compliant AI use. Okay, let's dive into the future of security, where AI is poised to become a critical ally in keeping us safe or yet another risk to mitigate. Phil and Brian, welcome to the ONTIC Protective Intelligence Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Sure. I want to start with a little bit of a preamble on kind of this. This is a complex topic that we're going to be talking about. Artificial intelligence it's rapidly becoming a topic of discussion in the physical security space. When we start with you, Brian, what types of physical security threats do you foresee becoming more prominent in the coming years? And do you think AI will help address these challenges or perhaps add to them?
There are tons of threats in the physical security space, the stuff that keeps us CSOs up at night. The biggest for me is an active threat. Here in the States, it's active shooter, somebody with a weapon coming in or with some sort of weapon, mostly firearms. And how do you predict that's going to happen or prevent it? Today, it's just super ad hoc, right? Shooting starts, and people start calling 911, and then they react to respond to that. I think there is a huge inflection point to where we can leverage AI like they do in cyber for cyber threats, but for physical threats to bubble up the threat so you can react to it much quicker. Now, how do you do that? I don't know. We're at the really nascent stages, but it's an exciting time to have this discussion.
Yeah, I think your point is really strong there because this is an untapped tool from a physical security standpoint. And as we know, so much of security can deal with pattern recognition and how can AI help us do that better? As humans, we're kind of slow with that, but how can we do it better and stronger? Phil, what's your take on this? What are you seeing in terms of what threats are you foreseeing, and then will AI help or hurt or both?
Yeah, I think because I'm a little more probably green in my career than some of the folks that are working in this physical security space. I think I've grown up a little bit more with technology and a little more comfortable with it at a baseline. So when I look at sort of how do we take technology and approach it to the physical world, it's more a question of who's actually building the technology and pushing it out and vetting it and trying to do more with it and iterate on it. So I want to make sure that when we look at addressing these physical threats as it applies to all of our facilities, all of the communities that we serve. We're trying to figure out really who's best and brightest out there in terms of application of these things like artificial intelligence. And I don't want a company or a vendor or a partner to be looking to put something into a platform that's just a buzzword, right? And I'm sure Brian would say the same thing. I mean, we need to know that this technology, one, is going to solve the need that we have, right? Two, adds tremendous value to the organization. And three, does actually help streamline that response process, that mitigation process as it relates to physical threats against, again, our people or our facilities. So I think I tend to take more of the sort of look at the technology first type of approach and then see how that will solve the physical challenges that we're now looking at.
Let me key off of a point that you're talking about early on, and you mentioned sort of having been you said you were greener in the space, sort of grew up more with technology professionally. I am not green in this space. I have been in the field of security for over 3 decades, and I find technology used to be a bit of a challenge. And so part of what I'm curious about is, what are you seeing in terms of how easy AI assisted security technology, whatever that may look like? What are you seeing in terms of adoption? What would you be looking at in terms of ease of use, things like that?
Yeah, well, I think with any technology stack, when you look at adding another component to that, right, especially in the physical security space where the stakes are so high, you need uptime, you need reliability, you need a good open and flexible architecture, that will integrate with the sort of amalgamation of other technologies that we're all putting into this stack to try and solve the physical issues. So I think from my perspective, I want a seasoned product and leadership team, right, that has an understanding of how to first build a technology platform, right? I mean, that's extremely important. Things like the open architecture, integration capabilities. It's not their sort of first rodeo, given how high the stakes can be for this technology not working, and just making sure that we have a full understanding back to front, of our own needs internally and our own requirements so that we can actually, foster those conversations.
Brian, let me turn to you for this. Collaboration is vital, right? I mean, we're always talking about breaking down silos in the security world, and how can we share information better and collaborate better. So it's vital, and security teams, especially on this AI issue, really can't go it alone. How do you see security being able to, or how should security leaders collaborate with legal, sort of, as Phil was just talking about, with kind of the techno, like the technical specs, I'd say, for AI-ish. How do you do that collaboration to ensure that there's responsible use, compliant AI use with corporate security? How do you start to pave that way for collaboration?
Well, I share Phil's concerns. However, because I run physical security, I have to rely on the technology teams, the IT, digital technology, the cyber teams. So whatever applications and platforms that we use, I'm not running it. I'm a customer. And so we have standards. You can't just plop something on our network, right? You have to go through all these policy and privacy reviews and ensure that it's vetted so it's not uh, something that is going to be vulnerable to uh, certain threats and risks. And so before we even bring a new technology within our network, it has to go through this series of reviews. So if we're using it, I feel pretty confident that it's safe to use. And we leverage the relationships with IT, the legal team, right? You have to go to legal reviews and privacy. So I'm really an end user. And what excites me about using AI, Phil wants kind of seasoned, tested stuff. I will pilot. I do a lot of pilots, right? And if you can do a pilot in a controlled sandbox area, then you can kind of kick the tires and test it out and see if it works. But going back to AI, it's about data, and data is the new oil, right? The more data you have Well, you have large language models and the data within your company. So Phil's company, my company, we have our own data sets. That is valuable for us as a company for, whether it's HR data, case management data, that way you can tell a story. Marisa, you were back with the Secret Service. I'm sure you had thousands, millions of data points of reports, right? Threats. And all of these sit in some sort of document, right? There are companies still doing handwritten reports. I know some police
Very
agencies
true.
still do handwritten reports. So how do you take all of this data and access it the speed of light using generative AI, where it can just communicate to an operator or an investigator to tell you where the threats are at? That's what really excites me.
How do you begin to learn that? Like how do you even set up a way to start to mine your own data and draw useful information from it using AI?
Well, the technology exists today. So the company I work for today, we have acquired, I think, about 13 AI companies in the last 6 years. And part of that is for like customer support, for operation centers. And it's really to help the person taking a call to help someone else to quickly have access to information, that customer information. And there's just data sets after data sets that you can easily identify patterns and responses. I don't know if you've ever been on a call for, I don't know, your cable bill or something. You get you get dropped, your call gets dropped from customer support. You call again, you talk to another person, and then you got to repeat yourself over it again.
Right.
And so you take stuff for consumer market or for customer support in enterprise, and then use it for physical security, use it for law enforcement, because we are so behind the times. When I say we, when I say from a law enforcement perspective, from a physical security perspective, we are so behind cyber. It's just
Yeah.
miles apart.
Well, Phil, let me turn to you on this. One of the things that I've seen in the course of my time in the security space is a, a silo between cyber and security that's often really difficult to break through because it's almost like those departments and professionals are speaking different languages. Is that what you're seeing with AI as well? Is AI another kind of like, this is a difficult language, and if you don't speak it, if you're not fluent, if you haven't grown up with this technology, is it going to be almost impossible to use? What are you seeing there?
I think it's like anything. I mean, you're going to have a learning curve when a new technology runs up against an industry that's been, sort of as tried and true in its methodologies as physical security and sort of, that law enforcement influence. I think sort of back to the point about a good leadership team, good technology product team at a vendor. It's really important that those vendors that are positioning artificial intelligence as a capability within these platforms that Brian and I would be looking at, they really have to be able to translate and be patient, right? And I think that goes without saying. But it's like anything. There will be thought leaders that come out, and start to sort of turn it into the vernacular, right? So that everyone can start to understand it. And I think if you're someone that sits in this space, like Brian, and you've got that little edge because you work at a company where you've actually seen acquisitions of these, artificial intelligence platforms just integrated into your own products that are offered. You've got an opportunity to be that catalyst, right? And be that knowledge expert. And I think, those of us that are sort of going down the path here as sort of as much as we can be early adopters, we owe it to the rest of the industries that we serve and our colleagues to try and best we can translate and push that information out. I mean, we're never going to get it right 100% of the time, but if we can start to at least have the conversations, that's better than just staring at this fancy new tool that's on our desk and afraid to touch it and not know what to do with it.
Thank you for saying that because I literally have had like I'm not I don't even know how to approach AI in terms of the work. I do a lot of writing and security, and I've thought this could be such a huge tool, but I literally am afraid to even go into ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever and start to use it because I feel like I don't know what I don't know. And so I feel like by even entering information, am I setting something off that I can't then control? And this is I'm very, very new to this space.
Well, and it's like Brian had alluded to too. If you have a sandbox or a test type of environment where you can, basically dip the toe in, right, instead of jumping in and doing a cannonball, that's always better, right? Because that'll help you, you as the working professional, start to build up that confidence. And I think, my perspective might be a little bit different too, just because I used to sit on the vendor side of a technology company, so I sort of understand what goes on that side of the business. And I think one of the things that all of our technology vendors are always trying to do is find those really good people that they can bring on board to help with those conversations, right? Those really sharp people that know how to explain things in an accessible way. So, I think having the right people selling the product, to us when we're looking to, add these things to our capabilities, that's going to be super important too.
The term I've heard for someone like that is boundary spanner, someone who can kind of speak both languages. You can speak security and you can speak human resources. You can speak cyber and you can speak law enforcement. Just kind of like how someone to kind of help translate. Um, Brian, let me ask you this, especially with the sort of pilot and sandbox issues that we were just talking about. Do you, and I'll ask this of you too, Phil, but Brian, let me start with you. Do you have any example of how AI has been useful from a physical security standpoint? Any case example or something you've been able to create to sort of demonstrate utility here?
Yeah, absolutely. We're deploying it now. One is a technology for camera surveillance technology. So when you look at CCTV and video coverage, the previous model with even with digital camera technology is motion detection, right? Motion happens, and then a security monitor will look at it. Well, with AI, you can replace a human from looking at a camera view, and AI will assess the situation for mundane door forced opens, people tailgating, and it could basically use AI to determine if there's a threat or risk. It can automatically go into the various access control uh, user interfaces and just assess the situation without a human touching it and only bubbling up the major risks. Like, yes, somebody did tailgate. We need somebody to look at it. Instead of sending a physical security guard to go check something out, AI already clears out 90% of these false alarms. We're also looking at access control and AI. AI vulnerabilities such or identifying vulnerabilities such as someone is not going through their normal pattern of coming to work, right? They're testing out they're badging in different buildings at different times of the night and day. And for a human to do that, it's just impossible. You just don't have the resources to do that. AI can pick it up almost immediately and bubble up to the top, get it to the investigations team. And this is real world. We're doing it today. And so it's exciting in that area. But I also want to add, when you talked about the divide between the cyber team and physical, that's a real thing. And they talk about converging of physical and cyber, and there's this headbutting in the industry. I am fortunate because I work for the Microsoft Corporation. I work for ServiceNow, which are all technology companies, and have really strong relationships with the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, and having that strong relationship. And today I'm working with Ben DeBont, the CISO for ServiceNow, in how we can adopt a platform, which is a cyber security platform, but building a physical component to it where you have case management, incident response, threat intelligence, all within an instance which is physical related, but it's converged with cyber. And that convergence really excites me because I'm not an expert in this. They are.
That convergence is so vital. I mean, just to the importance of being able to flag something and I am I'm very optimistic given that example you just described, because this is where we are seeing security teams so challenged is trying to handle the sheer increase in volume of threats coming in, whether it's physical threats, cyber concerns, and then how do you even try to triage, assess, gather that information? And what you're just describing is really the way AI can assist with that to help manage that and then get it to an investigations team as they need it. So you still have that human component involved. You're not completely giving over decision making to an AI run system, but it sounds like it's really helping with that, manage that volume and what can be the sheer overwhelm for security professionals in trying to face these growing threats.
Let me add, Marissa, this is for all the analysts out there that are worried AI is going to take their job. It's not. It's going to make your job easier because it's going to do all of the mundane tasks and then leave time for you to really do the deep dive assessment and analysis of what is really happening. You're always going to need the human overview of the data that spits out of this AI technology. So you you will always need a human in the mix. It's just making it easier. And going back to, I think Sam Altman talked about the comparison of ChatGPT coming into schools, and people are worried. And it's like, hey, back in the day when calculators came out and they allowed it in schools, right? Did people
Right.
fight? Did my grandfather's like, oh no, I'm going to use my pencil and paper and do these, long division, right? I mean, technology.
Well, and just, I mean, great analogy because it really can help free us up, analysts, investigators, guards. It can free you up to actually go to the next level of the analysis that needs to be done or response that needs to be done, because the time that would have been taken for us as humans to get that information, do that initial assessment or triage, is now handled, and you can go on to the next level of care for that situation or that case, it sounds like.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we've all really leaned into, I think, in this space is that recognition that we still need that human control and that human element. That gut feeling is not going to be replaced by something, you know, sending electrons over a wire. At least not yet.
Yeah.
So, Brian and I know we've talked about that before. It's definitely going to require human oversight for the foreseeable future.
We'll get back to the conversation in just a moment. But first, I want to tell you about ONTIC's Center for Connected Intelligence. In the world of safety, security, and protection, we know that sharing information is crucial. That's why we created the ONTIC Center for Connected Intelligence. The center is a hub for the ongoing exchange of security strategies and best practices, insights on current and past trends, and sharing valuable information through expert discussion and analysis. It's made up of subject matter experts with decades of experience across a wide range of disciplines. To find blogs, podcasts, webinars, white papers, and more, check out the center by visiting ontic.co/center. That's ontic.co/center. Phil, let me ask you a little bit. What about error rate? Are there, false positives, false negatives? How do you address that with, if you are giving a lot of the initial responsibility to AI? Where is there a concern about mistakes or errors?
Yeah, so I think it's like anything when you adopt a new process, you need to give it sort of a pilot phase, right? You need to understand how effective the technology can be at a baseline, understand from the vendor directly what you're looking at in terms of error rates or missed hits. And then from there, if you have a good team that's developing that model, that learning model, feedback, back to them as often as possible, and then a constant review of the data until you get to a point where you feel, from a compliance perspective or, a reasonable amount of time, you feel that you've sort of vetted out the capability as it exists. For us, we're looking at, just to tie it back to the last question too, we're looking at and standing up an integration with our camera and surveillance systems for AI-based weapon detection. one of the things we've really leaned into with this vendor is how they actually test their own stuff.
Mm.
And they're literally walking around a green room with, actual firearms, right? And they're all former military, law enforcement. They're walking around with holstered, unholstered, slung, unslung firearms, and helping the technology learn what to recognize. So the pre-work that they're doing gives that sense that, okay, I can rely on this maybe a little bit more than, a technology company that's just building it off of blue guns that, walk around, in a controlled environment.
Right.
This is a green room where they're actually doing a lot more, and they're putting a lot of effort into that initial vetting phase, right? And then that vendor in particular also has a human component, right? There's a control point before it even gets to us. They have a GSOC, they have, military and law enforcement personnel, former, who are familiar with firearms, what they look like, how people behave when they carry them. So the really good vendors that come out with these products that rely on AI to, determine that initial hit, even still, from what we've seen, are still passing it to a person to vet that out first.
Nice.
And then when it gets to us, there's that confidence that, yeah, this is a legitimate concern. Right? This is something that someone has already looked at. It's not just a crossbody handbag, on somebody walking down the hall. It's an actual, rifle sling, and we can tell and we know that. So now we have to take action.
So let me ask you, and Brian, I'll ask you this as well in just a minute. How can security teams even get started? I mean, it sounds like one of the things that you were just describing is how important it is to really vet the vendors and the process that they are using to create these models, learn from these models, adapt and update these models. What are some initial steps or resources that you recommend for security teams to start to go down this path of starting to use AI well in their practices?
Well, first thing I would say is listen to the Ontic podcast. So
There you go.
after that, I would say this world is small. Right? Brian can probably speak to this even better than I can. This physical security space world that we're all in is small, and word of mouth is a very big thing to consider when you're talking about questions that you have or vendors that you're looking at. Right? Let's say you're past the initial stages and you're looking at the vendors. Start asking through your network. Have you dealt with these people? Have you not? If you don't even know where to start, there are plenty of resources out there that can get you, a good baseline. But again, I would rely on the people in these industries or in this industry that have been here, seasoned, have seen a lot of different things come and go. Lean into that. Say, I don't, and just be honest. I don't know where to start. I've got my executive team telling me that we need to put some sort of thing in place for, a insider risk program, right? But we need digital and physical to speak to each other. We need to know when digital actions are going to result in, a physical attack, if possible, or we're looking at facial recognition. I don't even know where to start. Just put it all out there. Start talking to your network, and then over time, certain names will come up, and then you can start to dig into those a little bit too. And then there are always, sort of the professional organizations out there that we, all deal with and are a part of. Things like ASIS. I mean, there are plenty of resources out there. You have to be brave enough to be a fool for a time, right? Okay, but once you get past that phase, you'll come to a conclusion where you have some sort of understanding of what you need, what you're looking for, and then hopefully those really good vendors bubble up to the surface and can help guide you down that path.
That's great advice. Brian, your thoughts on this? Initial steps, how do you even get started for security departments?
So there are multiple kind of phases for people to dip their toe in the water. A lot of CSOs on the physical side. When I say CSOs, it's all physical.
Yeah.
They come from a traditional military law enforcement background, and they're slow to adopt stuff, and they really want things to be tested out and vetted. On the other hand, I'm like, I want to be the trendsetter. I want to be the innovator, right? And that's why I love working for technology companies, because they all allow me to do a sandbox and a pilot where I don't have to go full production. I can just have the day-to-day operational stuff, but I get to test stuff out. And I love when people come to me and go, hey, how does this work? How does that work? As Phil was talking about, we call it benchmarking, right? You benchmark with somebody. And I'll just give a shout out for Ontic. Heard of it? Spoke to Lucas at GSX several years ago.
Mhm.
When I came to ServiceNow, I had a need to build an intel team, threat intelligence intel, exec protection intel. And when I talked to Lucas and the OnTick team, uh, first thing I said after I got the pitch was, "Who uses you in this capacity?"
Yeah.
Right? And I, my test is if another CSO or their team is willing to talk to me as a customer, that's a positive. And so they gave me a bunch of names, and then I also reached out in the industry myself, as Phil's talking about, and I got my own independent assessment, and I was really pleased to hear the feedback. And then I also made some incredible new professional friends in the industry where my new head of Intel was able to connect with and did not have to reinvent the wheel, was able to take best practices from multiple uses of your technology. And this transcends through all types of technology, right? To do the benchmarking.
Yeah.
And so I'm an open book. If someone wants to come to me and say, "Hey, how are you leveraging X?" Uh, as long as you're not giving proprietary information, we in the security industry, because our job is to keep physical assets and people safe, we want to share the knowledge as best we can. And then I also wanted to add on to when you said the error rate, right, for AI. Hey, I have a Tesla. I got a new Tesla, and they offered me, full automatic driving. And I'm like, heck no, I'm not signing up for that. I'm scared. Okay, so I'm like, but like literally, people out there just automatic have the cars driving by themselves. So if they can do that, I'm fairly confident we're on the right track with AI and physical security. You're gonna need that human touch for vetting, but we are moving forward in this area. Those who don't want to do it will be left behind. And I'm
Yeah.
so old in this industry. I remember when cloud came out back in the mid 2000 or 2005, 6, and no security director, no CIO wanted to use the cloud. They're like, "No, I need the servers. I need to go in there, touch the server. It needs to be in my
Yep.
building." And look at it now. Right? Everything's in the cloud.
You were so right. I can't drive down a roadway here in Northern Virginia without passing like huge, server farms, and
Yes.
it's all the cloud. It's all where it is now. Um, it, Let me ask one more question for both of you. How do you avoid garbage in, garbage out? How can security teams start to use AI or really lean in, but also be able to validate the data that's feeding into these AI systems, so you don't have bad stuff going in that then leads to error rates that we were just talking about? How do you do that validation and avoid the garbage in, garbage out? Phil, let me start with you.
Sure, I think it's programmatic. So if you have a really good team like we do, at our organization of intelligence professionals that use tried and true methodologies, you are starting at a baseline, hopefully generating really good data, really good, case paperwork, if you will, on whatever it is that you're exploring, and hopefully the vendor that you bring in can look at that data set and very easily have some connections that they can make to avoid that GIGO, right? That garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that I'm really proud to talk about, especially at our group, is just the level of expertise that we've pulled in, across the organization. We've got, former federal law enforcement, three-letter agencies. I mean, U.S. military. We have, as good as you can get. So I'm extremely confident that when we get to the point of starting to generate, sort of more on the predictive side, if you will, from our data sets, that we're going to be in a really good place because we've started from the beginning with good tried and true methodologies. And over time, we've tweaked them, right, a little bit more toward how we operate as an organization. But I do feel that we're in a very good position, and that we will get to avoid a little bit of that simply because we started with a really good baseline.
Brian, any thoughts on that? The data validation. Yeah.
From the term garbage in, garbage out. I mean, it's just you get a plethora of data. Is it good data? Data's data. I think what's important is if you have the data, and as Phil's saying, he's got highly skilled practitioners that are providing that data, so that's good, solid data. The output is really the technology that's assessing it, right? And so is it good? Does it make sense? Now, Marissa, you said you didn't use ChatGPT. It's been out for a year. It's nothing short than magic. Okay. So if you took an analyst report from these very skilled analysts that have years and years of three-letter agency background, and they put hours and tons of hours in this report together. Now you can just take snippets from open source intel out there. Anyone out there that has not used ChatGPT, test it out. Write in a prompt for an intelligence report and see what it spits out and see how close it is to what something you would write. And don't get too upset if it looks really good, because you still, as a human, have to go in there and assess it to make sure it's correct, it's
Right.
right, it's consumable, but it's a tool.
Yeah.
And then you can use all of that extra time. Uh, you know, stepbrother analogy for activities, right? So that extra time is really to assess the threat. Because what we didn't address, we're talking about AI and technology and identifying threats and active shooter and weapon detection, all this kind of stuff. What about the response? That
Yeah.
is the hardest piece.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that threat? All right, I just see somebody with a gun walking up to our building. We have no armed security. What is it? We call in 911. What's that? A minute, 10-minute response? How do you address that so you could spend all that extra time figuring out the response piece?
And that's such a great example, because in the in the field of behavioral threat assessment, where I specialize, so much of the absolutely critical piece is in what do you do about it? That threat management piece. You can assess it, but then really the critical piece is how do you then prevent that violence, get someone off that pathway to violence. And so the human element is critical there. But if you can speed up the first part of the process, the gathering the information, your intelligence, your investigative piece, doing the assessment, that leaves more time, as you're describing, to actually do the important work, which is the intervention, the prevention piece of it.
Which is incredibly difficult. So let me throw out school shooting in Florida. Everybody knows about it. I'm not going to go into the details, other than there were reports, written reports,
Yeah.
of the suspect making threats online. There were calls made to report this particular person, and it was missed. And part of it was missed because you got, thousands and thousands and thousands of reports coming in. And so where
Yeah.
I think AI can help, and I'm talking to actually AI companies to see if they can convert whatever they're doing, or expand from just cyber to physical, speech to text.
Hmm.
911, what are we reporting? I'm reporting so and so made this, blah blah blah. Convert that to text. You got see something, say something, uh, text field that you put on an app, you send it out. You take all of that data and quickly, in seconds, identify a risk or a potential threat that's going to happen. Then you get that to the cops to go like, hey, you better check this out, because this person is either making this up, or there's a real threat and they're screaming for help here and you need to intervene. That's the hard part.
Well, I have to say, talking with both of you, I'm now a believer, and I'm going as Phil, as you said, I'm going to be brave enough to be a fool, and I'm gonna try this. I just want to say, having a chance to talk with both of you, I feel like this is incredibly encouraging information for the security field generally. It feels like there is tremendous promise, and also built into using AI, it really sounds like there is the ability to correct those errors as well, even more so than dealing with humans. We've got human error within the security space in all kinds of ways. It sounds like AI will give all of us as security practitioners a chance to leverage information much better, do what we do best even better, and then really decrease the error rate. So I went into this conversation skeptical about how I could use AI in the security space, and I feel like I've learned a tremendous amount from both of you. And also, I am very much encouraged and feel brave enough to be the fool, Phil, to quote back to you. Is there anything else that we haven't had a chance to address that you wanted to add, Brian? Let me ask you first.
I just appreciate the opportunity to speak about AI and what the future looks on the physical security side. As I said, it's here to stay. We as a community should embrace it. We should also be skeptical, right? To ask the hard questions. Is this not blindly accept a salesperson telling you, "Hey, this is the greatest thing"? You have to assess the technology and continue to talk about it and partner with peers like Phil and the rest of the industry.
Wonderful. Phil, any final thoughts or words of advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, this phenomenon that is artificial intelligence is very much still in its infancy, and that probably won't be the case for much longer. But it is still human built, right? So it is going to require some time and training and perfecting, and that's okay. But it's one of those things where, like I said, be the fool, take the chance, be comfortable being uncomfortable with all of this new technology in this physical space, and just leverage your peers and try to figure out what makes sense for you. As all of this stuff is swirling around, and you're looking for better, more efficient ways to protect your people and your assets. And I think with the guiding light of wanting to do the best for the organization and the people that you serve, you're still going to come out on top and leverage the best technology that makes sense for you. And I'm just thankful that I have the chance to meet people like Brian and you, and get to have these conversations to contribute a little bit of knowledge, and hopefully take a little bit of nervousness out for those that are maybe a little more hesitant to use some of this technology. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here and just talk through all this.
Well, you both definitely have removed that nervousness for me, and I'm now actually looking forward to seeing what I can do with it as well. Phil Capizzi, Brian Tuskan, thank you both so much for joining me in this discussion today. It's been incredibly informative, and I do hope it's an episode that our security colleagues share broadly, because I feel like it could benefit so many people in this field to learn more and to be encouraged and to be brave to take that step forward and test it out. Thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me.
This episode was brought to you by the ONTIC Center for Connected Intelligence. Learn more at ontic.co/center. Again, that's ontic.co/center. It was produced by AJ McKeon. Our music is a track called Monteverde Ride. It was written by Brian Bristow and performed by the Smoke and Novas. You can check them out on Spotify. Please remember to rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you choose to enjoy your podcasts. If you have questions, we'd love to hear them. You can reach us at podcast@ontic.co or visit ontic.co/center for more information. Thanks for listening.